Well, what do you know? Another shitty movie.
So much so that I almost had a massive coronary.
Indeed. Yoo-hoo! And thanks for tuning in to another awful movie review.
Evening.
Why have Count Dracula when you could have Count Yorga, Vampire, also known as the Loves of Count Yorga Vampire?
I shall save the answer for that question until the next time we meet.
Yes, this movie is basically a big low-budget middle finger to the Bram Stoker character. It's kind of like Coca-Cola coming out with the new Coke back in the 80s. Instead of Count Dracula, it's Count Yorga. Instead of Transylvania, it's Bulgaria.
You know where that is?
Instead of Bela Lugosi or Christopher Lee, it's Robert Quarry. And the Doctor Who smokes turned vampire hunter instead of Van Helsing. Really, this movie is a mess. But just before we get going, if there's a bad movie you'd like me to review, leave me a comment down below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, let me know your thoughts and feelings on Count Yorga Vampire.
Accept and try not to question.
A group of friends have a seance led by a guy who they later find out is actually a vampire. Count Yorga picks off his victims from the seance one by one and turns one of them into a bloodthirsty creature just like him, which naturally makes the characters grow more and more suspicious as to the real identity of this guy. Of course, I can barely remember any of them because they're so bland and nondescript that I couldn't care less about who they were. The runtime clocks in at slightly over an hour and a half, but I think the movie could have done more in less time.
I'm gonna tell you two guys something. I want you to keep it to yourselves.
The real problem with this is the pacing. The movie is slow and doesn't go anywhere. Once it was over, I asked myself why this was even made, because there's just no point to this dull, dreary, cheap-ass Dracula ripoff to exist. The acting is pretty bad, it gives no thrills, no action, no memorable scares or gore scenes.
Well, I was scared.
The story barely even gets into the vampire lore. Yorga doesn't even live in a fucking castle, there's no garlic, nor is there any turning into a bat. If the film had adopted all the stereotypes of vampire folklore and made it into something fun and entertaining, I would be all for it. I'd love it. But Count Yorga Vampire feels like a quick and lazy excuse to make a vampire movie without actually putting in the genuine time and passion for the subgenre that is vampire horror. The existence of this film gives no added value, that's what I'm trying to say, and it's not even fun.
What?
That's right.
You gotta be joking.
It's probably because this was originally going to be a soft porn film.
Come on, everybody, please, try to take this seriously.
But Robert Quarry would only agree to star in this if it was a straight-up horror picture, which would explain a lot of its faults, including the alternative title. On a technical scale, this movie doesn't achieve much either. The music choices are pretty questionable. Check this out. And let us not forget the recorded dialogue, which randomly decides to change volumes. And the story ends on a very lazy and half-hearted note.
Wow.
Overall, there are a million other alternatives to a Dracula movie than this.
I don't know.
I felt really bored watching this. I did not like Count Yorga Vampire, but by some miracle, since this was a success at the box office, there was a sequel pumped out just a year later. There was even talk of a crossover between Count Yorga and the abominable Dr. Phibes, but things never materialized, and it's all for the better. Last thing we'd want to see is Vincent Price getting involved in that shit. What an awful movie.